Hello everyone, welcome back to Major Hi-Fi. I'm Luke. Today we're going to be doing a comparison of JBL's Charge 5 and Flip 5 Bluetooth speakers. So you're looking to buy a Bluetooth speaker, there's way too many options, and you spend a bunch of time doing research, and then you narrow it down maybe to a certain price range and a certain company, and then you get to that point and there's still numerous options that don't have super clear distinction between them. And maybe at this point, if you're watching this video, you've come down to the JBL Flip 5 and the JBL Charge 5. Now, they look very similar. They have almost identical builds. Obviously, the Flip 5 is significantly smaller, and their price points are not super duper different. So this is $119 and this is $179. So let's talk about what the differences are and maybe, which one is going to be best for you. So to start off with functionality, these are both of course Bluetooth speakers, so you can pair your phone to them. You can actually pair multiple phones, up to 2, with both speakers and take turns playing songs. These both also have the ability to pair with up to 1 other JBL speaker, so if a friend has one or if you buy 2, you can use 2 at a time and play the same music out of them at the same time. And then these are both also waterproof, though the Charge 5 is also dust-proof, which the Flip 5 does not claim to be, at least nowhere that I could find did it say that it was dust-proof. So if you're around a lot of dust, then maybe go for this one. In terms of charge and battery time, we get a 2.5-hour charge time with a 12-hour battery life on the Flip 5 and a 4-hour charge time with a 20-hour battery life on the Charge 5. So in terms of sound, when I first looked at these, I was like, I feel like these are just going to be the same speaker, but one is louder because, they look the exact same, but they're different sizes. But I was quite surprised to see that they actually had very, very different sounds. So the Charge 5 has a much more filtered, cleaned up sound. It's very smooth. We get sort of the edges taken off the music, whereas with the Flip 5, it's a bit more of a really crisp, slightly sharp feel to it. So there's a bit more directness and forwardness to the sound. So the Flip 5 is maybe a little bit more biting than the Charge 5. And this makes sense because the Flip 5 is of course not as loud as the Charge 5, as you could guess from their sizes. And when you have a less loud speaker, it's pretty common to want to make it have a bit more of a cutting sound to compensate for what volume it can't produce, to make sure that no matter what, it's still cutting through the sound in a room and coming out clear over whatever background noise might be going on, or just is reaching the listener even from further distances, because you just want to, get the most you can out of what sound is available. So in terms of their low-end response, the Charge 5 definitely reaches into those deeper bass frequencies, whereas the Flip 5 kind of stays more in the upper area of the, bass response. So you're going to get a lot more of that kind of rumbling sensation with the Charge 5, but a bit more punch and pop with the Flip 5. So if you want a bit more of a sub-heavy bass response, then definitely go for the Charge 5. But if you're kind of indifferent to that area, if you don't really need that rumbling, extra booming sound, but you just want some extra definition, then go for the Flip 5. But if you get the Flip 5, you're not going to feel robbed of a good low end. It's just going to be given to you in a little bit of a different format, and like I said, with that less intense sub-range. Alright, so in terms of dimensionality, this is definitely one of their biggest differences. So you get a bit of a wider sound with the Charge 5. So you'll notice that, vocals may feel further forward while drums feel further backwards and other elements feel like they're surrounding the vocal. You'll get a bit more of a spread out image. With the Flip 5, we get a bit more even across the board, coherent, kind of glued together sound. So this makes sense once again, because when we have less power, we really want to make sure that nothing's getting lost. And so this will do a good job of making sure everything is very defined, not quite as much dimensionality, but it does make sure that you're going to hear every part of the song and get a lot of clarity, even, if you're further away or if you're playing it from, a louder volume and it's maybe not quite reaching you at as much of a level as the Charge 5 might be able to from, across the room or something like that. By no means does the Flip 5 feel one-dimensional, but you'll definitely get a bit more of a nuanced listen with the Charge 5. And yeah, in terms of volume, the difference in volume between these was definitely not as big as I expected. They can really compete at a lot of times. Of course, the Charge 5 is louder, but you're not getting a significantly quieter speaker with the Flip 5. What is different is how they function at their highest volumes. So if we're maxing out the volume or getting near there, on the Charge 5 we are going to lose some of the lowest bass frequencies. Not the majority of them, most of them are going to stay there, but just those lowest sub areas might not be quite as present or able to come through when we're really driving it, at its maximum. But because of its really smooth, cleaned up character, even at a really loud volume, this speaker does not sound really that harsh at all or anything of that nature, which is really nice. And because of its really good dimensionality, when you're trying to fill a large room and playing this loud, you get a pretty good three-dimensional sound from it. On the other hand, the Flip 5 at its loudest volumes definitely does a good job of cutting through the room, but because of its slightly more present mid-range and, crisper sound, we can get a little bit of harshness when we're really going up to the really high volumes. But that harshness is only going to be felt from certain positions and distances. For the most part, this kind of slightly sharp, crisper sound that the Flip 5 has is going to help it really cut through the room and fill it up even more at its highest volumes. So speaking of the room sound and whatnot, let's talk about how these sound at different positions and distances. So from a close distance, say sitting on your desk, right across from you, we're going to get a pretty obviously wider sound from the Charge 5 than we are from the Flip 5, and we're going to get a bit of a deeper bass response on the Charge 5, which is basically tracks with everything I said. However, if we move them further away, things change a bit. So if we have these, say, 15 feet away or so on a table, so elevated, the Charge 5 is going to retain its bass but have a little bit less rumble, and then the Flip 5 is going to get a lot more definition on drums and whatnot when we have that extra distance. So we get a really great sort of extra impact on claps and snares, anything in that area. I will say that vocals definitely cut further forward from a distance on the Flip 5, though they were a bit more warmed up on the Charge 5. And then if we have them further away from us, about 15 feet, the same distance except for on the ground, I actually found this to be the best application of either of these speakers because it allowed them to basically get the full spectrum of their bass response and still retain the rest of the frequencies really well. So for the Charge 5 in this positioning, I found that it definitely started to get a bit more physical of a bass response. Not floor shaking, but perhaps floor vibrating at times. And then while the Flip 5 was not giving us quite as much of this sort of physical sensation in the bass, that kind of extra added punch was even further accentuated, and it really gave me the most impact I heard from it my entire time listening to it. And then also from this distance, especially on the floor, their difference in dimensionality becomes less obvious and they start to be more on equal footing. But yeah, just in general, it felt like it accentuated the bass and the sort of impact and punch of both speakers, in the areas that they were already fairly strong in, and then gave me the same characteristics around the board that I'd had at a closer distance or elevated, but just with that nicer foundation of, more low end. So overall, these are definitely surprisingly different in their sound. I used to have a JBL Extreme 2, which also looks just like these and is only a bit bigger than the Charge 5. And I was expecting these to also kind of sound like that, and they really did not. The Extreme has a really subdued mid-range and really intense bass response, and these all sound distinctly different. They still have that kind of signature JBL sound, but it goes to show that there's a great amount of versatility between all of their speakers. In terms of choosing between these two, it might feel like volume is the biggest kind of point of decision, but I would say that it's really not a huge difference. If you need the maximum volume and you want to get the most volume you can for under $200, then yeah, get the Charge 5. But if you just need an average level of volume, you can really get either of these. It's just a matter of if you want that really crisp, kind of more cutting sound, or a bit more of that extra warm, but maybe not quite as forward, character that the Charge 5 has. And then of course, in terms of portability, these are on about equal footing, though, you could fit the Flip 5 in probably a really small bag or a purse, whereas the Charge 5 might need a bit more room though I think for a lot of people these should both be just about fine. They're really light, both of them, and they don't feel significantly different weights from each other. So yeah, that is my comparison of JBL's Flip 5 and Charge 5 Bluetooth speakers. If you have any other questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, hit subscribe, click the bell to get notified when we have new content. And if you want to read my written review of this, I will link that below too. All right, that's all I have for you, but I'll be back soon with some more reviews. And until next time, happy listening.